If I had been a little less careful, I might not be here to tell this story. It started with a stranger banging on my car window. But the real terror was waiting for me at home. I consider myself cautious, borderline paranoid even. I don't stand too close to the road when waiting for the walk signal. I share my location with my sister and mom at all times. I always lock my car doors the second I get inside. And yet, if I had been just a little more careful that night, I might not be here to tell you this story. It all started just after midnight. I had just finished covering a late shift for a friend, exhausted and starving. On my way home, I decided to stop at my favorite grocery store to grab something quick to eat. The store was in a quiet, isolated part of town. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about being there. But as I walked out of the store with my food, the cashier locked up behind me, turned off the lights, and left me standing in an eerily empty parking lot. I should have gone straight home, but instead, I did something I never do. I sat in my parked car and started eating. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the fact that, after a recent breakup, my house didn't feel welcoming anymore. I just didn't feel like rushing home. So I locked my doors, played an episode of The Terror on my phone, and settled in. I had barely taken a few bites when I heard it. A sharp, urgent shout cut through the silence. I looked up and nearly jumped. A woman was standing right in front of my car, waving her arms wildly. I hadn't seen or heard her approach. 1 second, I was alone. The next, she was just there. My stomach twisted as she walked around to the driver's side window and motioned for me to roll it down. No way in hell. She looked normal enough. Clean, well-dressed, but I wasn't about to risk it. Then, she shouted something that sent a bolt of ice through my veins. "There's someone in your back seat." My body froze. Every horror movie, every urban legend, every crime story I'd ever heard came rushing back. My mind painted the worst possible images. A figure crouched behind me, gripping a knife. A pair of hands reaching around my neck. A gun pressing against my skull. I had to run. I grabbed the door handle, ready to bolt. But something made me glance at my rearview mirror first. There was no one there. My car was small, a compact hatchback with almost no room to hide. If someone had been back there, I would have seen them. Confusion replaced my fear. I turned around, scanning the cabin, checking every dark corner. Nothing. Then, from outside, click. I snapped my head back around. The woman had moved closer. Her hand was wrapped around my door handle, and she was trying to open it. I locked eyes with her, and my stomach dropped. For the first time, I really looked at her face. Her skin was too tight, stretched over sharp bones like plastic wrap. Her eyes were too deep, too round, and when she smiled, thin lips curling up at the corners, I saw too many teeth. A twisted, knowing smile, like she had just played a joke on me. Panic kicked in. I slammed my car into reverse and floored it. For a horrifying moment, she kept pace with me, her grip still on my door handle as I rolled backward. Then, finally, she let go. I sped out of the lot, hands trembling, mind racing. Had she been trying to rob me, or was it something worse? Was she working with someone? Had there been another person waiting nearby? Had I almost become another missing person case? I didn't stop driving until I reached home. My heart was still pounding as I rushed inside, locking every door and window behind me. The house felt wrong, too dark, too quiet. I turned on every light, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I barely slept that night. When I finally did, nightmares took over. I dreamed of her face, watching me from the shadows, smiling, and then a loud, frantic banging at my front door snapped me awake. I sat up, heart in my throat. My alarm clock read 4:17 a.m. The knocking continued, sharp and desperate. Someone was slamming on my door. I crept toward the entryway, my breath shallow. Then, a voice called out, deep, familiar. "Hey, are you awake? It's me, Brian." Relief flooded through me. Brian was my neighbor. He lived across the street. We weren't close, but I saw him around all the time. Still, something about his tone felt off. I hesitated. "Brian?" What's wrong?" A pause. Then his voice cracked like his throat was dry. Do you have someone over right now?" The words sent an immediate chill down my spine. "No. Why?" Brian coughed, then continued, "Well, I was outside with my dog, and I saw someone standing in your front window." My stomach dropped. Every hair on my body stood on end. She followed me home. I turned, scanning the dark hallway behind me. I felt eyes on me. My skin crawled as I whispered, "Brian, are you okay?" Another pause. Then, something shifted in his voice. It sounded wrong, a little too high-pitched, a little too curious. "Of course, I just caught a cold, but I wanted to check on you." My blood ran cold. Something wasn't right. Something was terribly, terribly wrong. I took a shaky step back. "Brian," I said carefully, "isn't your dog a girl?" Silence. A full minute of nothing. Then, the door handle moved. I heard it creak as someone tried to turn it. It jerked downward, rattling as they pulled on it, testing the lock. Then, bang! A single forceful slam against the door. My breath stopped. I felt frozen in time. Then, nothing. The silence stretched. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the living room window. I peeked through the blinds, and I saw her. A figure in the distance, walking away from my house. I couldn't see her face, but I knew it was her. The same twisted smile, the same uncanny presence. I stood there shaking, watching until she disappeared into the night. I never saw her again. But even now I still feel it. A presence, watching, waiting. Some nights I wake up in cold sweat. Sure, I hear knocking at my door. Or worse, the click of a door handle turning. This was the end of our story. But it's far from the end of the terror. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I post new horror stories every week, and you don't want to miss the next one. And if you've ever had a creepy encounter like this, share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you think. And who knows, your story might be featured in a future video. Stay safe out there. And remember, the terror might not be over just yet.